analytical results on page 2, where it says that there's total particles characteristics is 0, and then total 2 component particles is over 9. And it explains up here what 2 components are. And the 2 components, it says right here that 2 component...
You can't read from the report.
All right. 2 component and 1 component GSR are 2 component and 1 component particles are consistent with GSR.
Okay. But there is no definitive determination that an expert would make that it is GSR without all 3 components. Is that correct?
No, so you're missing the point. There are 3 components to GSR. The report that you just referenced states that they found 2 of the 3 components of GSR. Now, it is not normal for people to have in their car lead and barium. So lead and barium are going to be in the car from a GSR incident. So those are the 2 that were collected. The nitrates were not collected because it's 3 years after the fact for me.
Okay.
So,
Understood.
Therefore, when it says 1 component, which is going to be the lead, 2 component would be the other, which is barium, they are characteristics of GSR. And on that report, it states that 2 component particles, there are over 9. So that is everything but the nitrates, and if it was collected on day 1, you would have the nitrates. So your argument is not right.
Okay. So let's go now to 67. We're at 6729. That's the photograph with the gentleman looking at the stars. Let's go to 6730 and get a clearer picture of 6730. 6731. This is another scenario that you posited.
Correct.
And in that scenario, you have someone holding the gun sideways and sticking their hand in the window like I have my phone in my hand right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't consider somebody back here sticking the gun in a way that would be natural to shoot as opposed to what you depicted.
So if I were to consider your scenario, the projectile would actually end up in the headliner and possibly through the roof, because that is a very sharp angle. You're on your knee and you're shooting in an upward position through the window, and it would not hit anybody but the car.
Okay, I'll give you that. This chair, you would agree, that I was trying to demonstrate on is lower than the car window. You'd agree with that?
Yes.
So I wouldn't have been on my knee. I was trying to give you a demonstrative. You can
you didn't tell me that.
Okay. So if somebody were sticking their gun in a natural firing motion as opposed to sidearm at the back of that window at an angle that would have allowed the projectile to go through that window, that's not something you considered and thought maybe you might put in the picture as opposed to this guy with the sidearm action?
Well, again, we could go back and forth onto every possible scenario that you could have in your mind. I'm not going to entertain all of your scenarios. If you come up with one that would line up with the blood and the trajectories, then we can talk about that. But as far as your scenarios that are moot, I can't speak to them because they don't make sense.
Fair enough. Have you ever in your 19 plus years seen someone fire a firearm with their hand in the position that you see depicted in your demonstrative 6731? Ever?
Well, as you said earlier, maybe in the movies.
A bad movie.
Well, I mean, whatever movie you want to pick.
In real life, have you ever seen anybody at the range or anywhere fire a firearm in the way that you depicted that person in 6731? Ever?
I don't recall, but it is a possibility that a firearm can be fired in that position without jamming and strike a target.
Okay. Now let's move to 6732. Same picture, same angle.
Yes.
Right? 6733, same sideways gun angle from the other side of the car.
No, it's the same side.
I mean, the photo being taken from the other side of the vehicle.
Correct.
Okay. 6734. The gentleman is holding the firearm again.
Same position.
Same position. 6735, same position.
Yes.
6736, same position.
Yes.
Okay. Now, of all the scenarios you could come up with to put in your report and to have demonstrated, every last one of them included somebody holding a firearm at an angle that you have never seen anybody hold it in your life.
No, that's an incorrect statement.
Okay. You were brought in to do a reconstruction, a shooting reconstruction, correct?
Yes.
And prior to doing that, you observed the shooting reconstruction that Miramar did, correct?
Yes.
And I think you said you took one look at it and you knew you had to start from scratch, right?
Yes.
The terms that you use is what Miramar did was the worst thing you had seen in your life, right?
Yes.
Okay, because they use string and some kind of gum, putty,
Putty.
and first of all, in their depictions or in their reconstructions, they had the string sagging.
Yes.
They also had all the strings from all of the perforations tied to the same lamppost, right?
Yeah, to the ruler, like a ruler thing.
The ruler,
I think it was a ruler.
which didn't make sense at all.
No, that would surmise that the shooter stood there and made miraculous rounds.
Okay. And that, so just to be clear, what Miramar did before you took over was totally incompetent, in your professional opinion.
Improper characterization.
It lacked training.
Okay. When you said it's the worst thing you had seen in your life, your words, what you meant to say was it lacked training.
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, I don't like to be rude, but it lacks training.
Okay. So if you weren't being rude, you would say that it was an incompetent exercise and investigation.
Sustained. Let's move on. You got your point.
Okay. Thanks. And then when you took over, the first thing you asked the state to do was tell you who, strike that. Did the state tell you who they thought the shooters were?
Objection, hearsay.
Excuse me, motion second.
Who they thought the shooters were.
The state advised me of who the defendant.
What was the analysis they asked you to conduct with respect to the two people they had already identified?
To determine if it was a drive-by shooting or not.
That was the only purpose?
Yes.
Okay. And you asked the state to go and get you the heights of the two defendants that they had already identified, right?
Yes.
And they obliged.
Yes.
Okay. And did you take the measurements yourself?
Yes.
You have your report there?
Yes, sir.
I want you to refresh your recollection.
Objection, proper impeachment.
Okay. You determined. Give me a second. After you did you took measurements of Cortland Henry and of Melly, Jamell, right?
Yes.
And you reduced them, you memorialized them in your report, right?
Yes.
And you determined that Cortland Henry's height was 70.5 inches,
Correct.
which would be how much in feet and inches?
5 feet 10 and a half.
5 feet 8.5.
So 60 inches is 5 feet. So 10 inches after that. 5, 10 and a half.
5, 10.5? Okay.
Am I wrong?
I don't know if that's fine. 70 inches. Let's just leave it at that.
70.5, yeah.
And you determined that his shooting height was 60 inches.
Correct.
How did you determine that?
So that was from him standing in a standing position, his arm extended out at 90 degrees, and a measurement was obtained from the ground to his finger.
Okay. Could you stand up, if you don't mind, Your Honor, and demonstrate what you determined was a shooting height?
Yes.
Okay. So, stay there for a second. When you say shooting height, stay sideways. You mean hand out at 90 degrees?
90.
Okay. So when you are determining, stay up there for a second. All right. So when you say 90 degrees, you are assuming that that person was not shooting at that trajectory, or that, correct?
No, not correct.
Okay. But your analysis only took that angle into account
No.
for the standing shooting height.
So you have two different heights. Sorry, that hurt. Two different heights that are made into account. So the one that we just talked about, and then we have squatting with the hand out
Okay.
at 90.
All right.
So now we have what you just asked for, that window. Follow?
Okay. So you determined a standing shooting height of 60 inches, and you determined that by measuring the tip of Cortland Henry's arm from the ground with his arm extended at 90 degrees from his body.
Yes.
Okay, you sit there. And then you also determined you called it a squatting shooting height of 28 inches.
You all right?
I keep tripping with this thing.
Off the wires? I'm sorry, let's see what we can.
Sorry about that, Judge. See if we can anchor it. Just don't trip. Okay. And you also determined what you refer to as a squatting shooting height of 28 inches, right?
Yes.
And when you say squatting, I think the demonstration you made was